Marissa never intended to seek revenge. She was the good niece, the one who brought hot soup when her uncle had a cold, remembered her grandmother's birthday, and always arrived with a homemade pie. But everything changed the day she overheard a conversation behind a closed office door. "You're too soft on her," Uncle Richard told her father, Jeremy. "She's an adult now. It's time to stop spoiling her, especially if she's not going to help with the house." "She does help," her father replied. "She comes every weekend, cleans, cooks. You even said you appreciated her care." "I did. Until I realized she's only doing it for the inheritance." Marissa froze. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure they'd hear it through the door. She couldn't believe it. Uncle Richard had always seemed so noble. Strict, yes, but fair. Now his voice dripped not with concern, but with cold calculation. She didn't walk in. She simply turned and walked back to her car, leaving the blueberry pie on the passenger seat. That evening, for the first time in years, she didn't call her father. Uncle Richard Wilson was a man whose reputation rested on two pillars: success and integrity. He owned an insurance firm, lived in a spacious suburban home with a manicured lawn, gave lectures at the local community college about family values, and personally handed out Christmas gifts to every grandniece and nephew. But beneath that polished exterior, calm smiles, tailored suits, and rehearsed kindness, lay a quiet, icy cruelty that needed no shouting to destroy. His brother Jeremy, Marissa's father, had always been different. A high school history teacher, he lived modestly but happily. Despite frequent financial struggles, he never asked Richard for help. When Jeremy developed heart problems, Richard offered to let him temporarily move in while he recovered. Marissa, then in college, was relieved. Finally, her father would be looked after. But soon, she began noticing odd things. First, small details. Her father grew quiet, avoided gatherings with relatives. Then, the family photos disappeared from the mantel. And finally, her grandmother's old recipe journal, the one her father cherished like a sacred heirloom, vanished. Uncle Richard said it was taking up space, her father whispered one evening, alone with her in the kitchen. He said it's time to stop clinging to the past. Marissa said nothing, but something inside her cracked. 2 years passed. Jeremy died suddenly, an unexpected stroke, worsened by chronic exhaustion and stress. At the funeral, Richard delivered a eulogy. He spoke of brotherly love, of unbreakable family bonds, of cherished memories. Marissa sat in the front row, watching him. She didn't cry. She just stared. And for the first time in her life, she felt true hatred. After the burial, what she would later call the War of Politeness began. Richard offered to let her stay in her father's house for now, but immediately changed the locks on the study for security. Then he started implying she spent too much time in the living room, that the house isn't a dormitory. One day, returning from work, Marissa found her suitcase by the door. A note read, "You're an adult now. It's time to build your own home." She didn't cause a scene. She simply left. And began planning her revenge. Marissa knew revenge couldn't be driven by rage, it had to be precise. Her uncle was too careful to leave obvious traces. But he was a creature of habit. And habits were his weakness. She started small. First, she dug up old family gathering videos, recordings she'd made years ago, just for memory. In them, Richard repeatedly spoke about the importance of trust in family, claiming that blood ties are worth more than money. Then she checked city tax records. She discovered that the house her father lived in had been officially transferred to Richard's name a full year before Jeremy's death, listed as a gift between brothers at a suspiciously low valuation. Second, she tracked down a former employee of Richard's insurance company, a man fired for unethical conduct. In truth, he'd been let go for questioning internal policies that allowed Richard to deny legitimate claims from elderly clients. The man, exhausted by years of silence, gave Marissa access to internal documents. Among them were emails where Richard advised managers to hint to clients that their claims aren't covered to avoid payouts. Third, she contacted her father's lawyer, an elderly but scrupulous man named Lawrence Miller. He remembered Jeremy and, upon learning Marissa was his daughter, agreed to help pro bono. It was he who found the final piece. The will. Not the version read at the family meeting after Jeremy's death, but the original, held by the notary. According to it, All of Jeremy's assets, house, savings, personal effects, were to go to Marissa. Yet a month before his death, a document titled Transfer of Property Management Rights had been signed, bearing Jeremy's name. Except the handwriting was forged. And the notary who certified it? A former employee of Richard's. Marissa didn't go to court. Not right away. She knew Richard would hire the best attorneys, drag the case out for years, and ultimately just pay a settlement. No. She wanted him to lose everything he'd built over decades, his reputation, respect, the illusion of control. She chose a date, the first anniversary of her father's death. The family was gathering for a memorial dinner at Richard's house. As always, he played the patriarch, handing out expensive chocolates to the grandchildren, telling nostalgic stories about the good old days. When everyone was seated at the table, Marissa stood. "I'm sorry to interrupt dinner," she said calmly, "but I brought something I think everyone here needs to see." She turned on the projector she'd secretly set up in the living room earlier that day. On screen appeared footage from a family dinner 5 years prior. Richard, smiling, said, "Family isn't about sharing money. It's about sharing pain." Then came a scan of her father's original will. Then the forged transfer document. Then internal emails from the insurance company instructing staff to deny claims. Finally, sworn statements from former employees. The silence in the room thickened like smoke. "You're lying," Richard shouted, leaping to his feet. "It's all fabricated. This is just revenge." "You're right," Marissa replied evenly. "It is revenge. But it's not lies. Every document is notarized. Every video is original. And those words? They're yours." His wife stood and walked out without a word. His daughter grabbed the children and followed. 2 nephews exchanged glances, then one shut off the projector and simply said, "We're leaving." By the end of the night, only Richard and the housekeeper remained. A month later, Richard's insurance company lost its license. He sued Marissa for defamation, but the case was dismissed. The evidence was overwhelming. His name vanished from charity boards, lecture rosters, and country club memberships. He tried to sell the house, but buyers backed out once they learned who the previous owner was. Meanwhile, Marissa got her father's house back, not through court, but through public pressure and family support. Some relatives apologized. Others didn't. But she didn't care. One evening, she sat on the porch holding her grandmother's old recipe journal. The apple pie recipe was on the first page. She remembered her father's words, "Revenge doesn't make you stronger, but justice does." She smiled and walked into the kitchen, turned on the oven, and began baking a pie, exactly the way her father had taught her. Richard moved to another state. Rumor has it he works nights as a warehouse guard. No one visits him. Marissa opened a small cafe near her father's old school. She named it Jeremy's. On the wall hangs his photo and a quote, "History is what we choose to remember." And every year, on the anniversary of his death, she bakes a pie and leaves one slice on an empty chair, not out of grief, but as a reminder. Family isn't about blood. It's about choice. And betrayal never goes unanswered.